Within months of their horrific car accident with the Southern Gentleman, Bill Handel and Frank Rourke saw their long and fruitful partnership draw to a close. This business with the Gentleman had not been officially sanctioned by Deep Red Ops or the Order. Both organizations were starting to think that the friendship between these two men was getting in the way of the bigger picture. They reunited again on the Death Trap Killer case in Arkansas, and very soon after that, for the Hand Collector case in Washington. Both cases had very different results, but drew heavy media scrutiny. The men had been seen together in public more than once. They were soon given their final assignment: to negotiate and broker a truce with a cult called the One True Faith and their enigmatic leader, John Sunday. This cult went back farther in some states than the actual statehood. They were organized. They were impossibly well funded with old world blood money. And they were dangerous. The last few years had seen a rise in public knowledge of the machinist killings, horrific torture kills where the victims were transformed into artistic tableaus. On his own, the machinist could have been handled a lot more discreetly, but the same could not be said about Razormouth. The post-human abomination left a fearful impression, one not quickly forgotten, and public pressure was mounting to remove this monster from the field of play. Had Razormouth not been affiliated with John Sunday and the One True Faith, it would have been very easy to have him taken out. But even an organization as deep as the DRO didn't want to risk going head-to-head with the One True Faith. They felt it was a zero-sum game, so they needed to reach an accord. They sat down at a bargaining table. John Sunday looked at Bill and said, "I know you. I've seen your picture. You're famous. More famous than you should be for your job." The cult leader had flat, lifeless eyes. It was like staring into the vacant, open eyes of a fresh corpse. Sunday tested Bill's nerves and his patience, but ultimately he had to admit that the agent was giving him a good offer. The machinist and Razormouth both needed to be made public examples of. Law enforcement gets a big win. The cameras have a feast of sorrow. The public feels safer, and no one ever comes looking for John Sunday again. In return, Sunday and his organization would be given permanent Code Crimson status, meaning that no law enforcement of any level could ever bother them, could ever attempt to investigate them, ever. Which was another layer of security for the cult. Sunday could substitute a look-alike for himself, one that he had been crafting for years through plastic surgery and brainwashing. Unfortunately, there was no such substitute for Razormouth. The monster was too unique. He needed to be taken publicly and sacrificed on the altar of law and order for the greater good. It seemed like Sunday wasn't going to go for the deal. He was actually fond of the monster, at least as fond as he could be of anyone. But he couldn't deny it, and so the deal was struck. After that, the partnership of Bill Handel and Frank Rourke was ended. Both men were reassigned out of the field and into more managerial positions. But the friendship didn't end. The relationship between Bill and Frank continued. Over time, it changed, it evolved, until one day, it turned red. This is part 2 of the story of Bill Handel and his life of death. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem, killers, cannibals, and cults, fearful fiction and furious fact, tall tales, and terrible truths. This is a scary home companion. At this point, Bill Handel had been a field agent for Deep Red Ops for almost 20 years. He'd started off as a golden child agent, with a powerful rabbi looking out for him. Now, he was the rabbi, and had been bringing along a handful of carefully chosen agents under his watch. Bill never spoke of it to anybody but his husband, but he had become keenly attuned to the problems within the DRO and with the DRO itself. He understood that the DRO by its very nature was problematic, and much of the work they did needed to be kept hidden from public view. They were the Black Hats, and they kept the other Black Hats from doing something even worse. All that said, he knew that they could be doing more and that they could be doing it differently. Nothing illustrated this better than Helping Hand. This program had introduced a few overtly malevolent agents into the field. And that wasn't as problematic for Bill as the fact of how well these agents fit in. The DRO was a soulless, heartless beast, but a necessary one. It harnessed evil and used the horror and violence as a weapon to keep others safe. This kind of a weapon needed to have the right finger on the trigger. Bill believed that the director's office had either lost its direction or become corrupted. He also believed, more fervently than ever, that he was the best man for the job. The director's office did not have a fixed location. The term director's office referred to the central command for the organization, but the physical location never stayed still for very long. No matter where it was, the director's office always looked exactly the same. A semicircle of conference table under a single fixed overhead light. Always the same table, always the same light. 6 people at the table. and behind them, crouched in shadow, was the director's desk, which bore the nameplate John Spires, Director, front and center. Over the years, many different men had sat at that desk, but they all acknowledged that it was John Spires' desk, and they just sat behind it. Tradition was very important to the DRO, and Bill vowed to himself that he would honor many of those traditions when he sat at that desk. Bill was very familiar with the director's office. He'd been a regular visitor there for the last decade. It was no secret that he was one of the best field agents they'd ever had. Bill allowed them to groom him, and he never showed more than the appropriate level of ambition. If he wanted it too much, it would be a turnoff. If he didn't want it enough, it would be suspicious. But if there was one thing that Bill knew how to do, it was act like everything was okay. His emotions were very restrained to begin with, but he was excellent at hiding them entirely and always had been. Bill was placid. He was calm. He was friendly. Although he made friends, he was much more interested in grooming agents to be loyal to him. He had ones that he knew he could trust, like Lefty, and others who were indebted to him, like Dr. Ivy Williams. He'd taken a younger agent named Kevin Koja under his wing some years before, and also a recruit from the DRO branch in Israel named Hiram Colt. Different specialists from different offices and different projects. Bill was reaching out. He was developing a network. Except for Project Punchbowl, of course. Other than a couple of meetings very early in his career, Bill had been excluded entirely from this very old, very well-respected arm of the DRO. He came to understand this was because of his relationship with Frank Rourke and the Order. The Order was obsessed with the brain tumors, something that Bill had borne witness to himself in their underground vault. Project Punchbowl was the name of the decades-old research program into these very same tumors by the DRO. It had always been kept confidential to the very highest levels, and they operated in complete secrecy. The DRO had no desire to share any of their data on this subject, so they ensured that Bill Handel remained ignorant. They were smart to do so, because Rourke was always subtly trying to inquire into the project. It was one of the main reasons the Order had forged this partnership to begin with. They wanted to get closer to whatever data and specimens the DRO labs had on these brain tumors. Honestly, Bill had nothing to tell him. But he did still work with Helping Hand, and he knew that Punchbowl had been sending over assets through the years. Subjects who had been transferred from Punchbowl to Helping Hand to be released back into society and studied. Bill knew that there was one subject who connected all of these assets. He didn't know his identity, but this man was called Emissary One. Due to his rising influence at the DRO, Bill was finally able to see a pet project to completion. Lefty had become his right hand out in the field, and he had entrusted her with bringing down the Southern gentleman. He found himself unsurprised that she succeeded. The woman was a hunter. She took the gentleman to a secure facility in Michigan and placed him under the care of another one of Bill's trusted inner circle, Dr. Ivy Williams. In just a few years, she had worked her way up to being a site director and was a bit of a golden child herself. A few short months later, Bill was called into the director's office. He found Dr. Williams waiting for him in front of the table of 6. She looked at him. She shrugged. She said, "Sorry, Bill." They explained to Bill about the upcoming field experiment that Williams had proposed, a mass release of the inmates of her facility. Would these psychopathic animals be able to work together, or would they turn on each other? There were no limits to the data they could gather. Bill didn't blink. He said, "That's fine. When can we transfer the gentleman to Black Site 1? They explained to him that they would not be doing that. In his time under Dr. Williams' care, the Southern gentleman had demonstrated no potential tactical value. The DRO had no use for him, so they were going to cut him loose. Bill hid his rage, but he showed his irritation just enough. He argued his personal stake. He showed the sort of low-grade passion that made him look like management material. And then he backed down, showing the sort of low-grade bootlick that made him management material. "I'm disappointed, but I understand your decision." After all, he was a company man from birth. Knowing that the Southern gentleman was out on the roads again, ate at Bill, tore him up. He buried himself in work, more focused than ever before on his end goal. It was just a few days after the night of the long knives, when the gentleman had been released, when Bill got a call. He was to report to the director's office immediately. The 6 people at the table were gone this time. There was only the shadow at the director's desk, who said, "Emissary 1 has been taken." Bill said, "Kidnapped? Dead? What do you mean?" The director said, "Ira Dunwich is dead. The thing inside him, Emissary 1, has been taken by your friend, the priest." It was Keyshawn's birthday, and as was their tradition, he and Bill were in the kitchen preparing a champagne brunch when a knock came at the front door. This was highly unusual because, as a DRO agent with a life built on secrets, Bill had a very remote and hard-to-access house. No one had ever dropped by unannounced before now. Bill grabbed his sidearm. Keyshawn picked up the assault rifle they kept in the front hallway, only to find Frank Rourke on the doorstep with a magnum of champagne under his arm. "Am I late for brunch?" Frank came into the kitchen where he and Keyshawn finished making the food while Bill stood and watched, the gun still in his hand. They sat down to eat, and Keyshawn scolded him. "No guns at the table. You know my rule." Bill was staring at Rourke. "You have to tell me what happened, Frank." "With what?" "Emissary 1. You were there." "I thought we agreed to keep work and friendship separate, didn't we, Bill?" "I need to know, Frank. It's important." "Okay. Yes, I was there. Above anyone else, you know what I wanted from the DRO, Bill. It has nothing to do with you. I got some information, I followed up on it, and then I did what I felt I needed to do. Ira Dunwich was a bad man, Bill. You don't know how bad. It's best this way, trust me." He was opened up. Something was taken from his head. Rourke noshed down half of his mini quiche, nodding in agreement. Yes, of course. And it was taken back to the fortress. You remember the vault? That was the first place that I went. And he was speaking honestly. So Bill traded out the gun for a fork and started to nibble on his fruit salad. Keyshawn had been looking back and forth between the two men as they talked. "So, are we done with the cloak and dagger bit? What we need to be talking about is this champagne. It's amazing." They sat and they ate, they drank, and they talked like old times. Rourke seemed to be his usual self, so Bill went with it. But he was studying his old friend very closely. There was something off, but he didn't know what. His phone rang, and Bill excused himself from the table to answer it. "That better be important," Keyshawn said. "If it's ringing, then it's important," Bill answered very shortly, and then stepped out onto the back porch. It was Kevin Koja, one of his few close, trusted agents, who told him something happened at the fortress. The order is dead. Bill said, "What do you mean?" I mean terminated with extreme prejudice. All of them. Dozens. Maybe 200? They're still counting the bodies. They haven't found Rourke yet, but we know that he was there. I'm sorry, boss. I know he was your friend. I thought you should hear it from me. Bill hung up. He dream-walked back into the house and found Rourke sitting in the living room, alone. Is everything okay, Bill? He asked innocently. But the way he smiled, the way he looked at him, Bill could tell. He knew. Still, he played it off. It was just work. It's always the end of the world on my day off. You know how it is. He sat down across from Rourke and asked him very softly, "Where's Keyshawn?" Frank ignored him. Have you ever thought about how much you and I could accomplish together, Bill? Not that we haven't already, Lord only knows, but there is still so much work to be done. Imagine if you were in charge of the DRO and I was running the order. The world could be ours, don't you think? We could finally make a real difference. Bill nodded and then said, "Where's Keyshawn?" We are friends, Bill, aren't we? Of course we're friends, Frank. No. I mean right here, right now, in this moment. We're still friends, right? Because the way you're looking at me, I have to wonder. Why wouldn't we be friends, Frank? After everything that we've been through, nothing could change that. Rourke smiled a little bit, but Bill couldn't tell if he bought it or not. That's great to hear, Bill. And that's why I wanted to be here today when you found out what happened. Because I needed you to see that I'm the same man that I always was. Keyshawn entered the room with fresh drinks for everybody. You see? Rourke flicked his eyes towards Keyshawn. In times like these, it's good to know where to find love in the world. It would be a shame for anything to ever happen to it. They toasted to love and to trust. Later, when Rourke left, Bill immediately turned to his husband and said, "Start packing. We move tomorrow. He can't know where we live anymore." Bill Handel made moves, but he made them quietly. He took inspiration from something Keyshawn had told him about chaos magic. And so instead of using direct action, he subversively influenced events in ways that could never be tracked back to him, such as having Lefty deliver a cell phone to Cindy Jenkins in Black Site 1. Bill remembered Jenkins from when she was a teenager. She had an innate ability to use mad dog killers for her own ends. He was not disappointed. And through his influence came the massacre at Black Site 1. And the resulting disgrace of Dr. Ivy Williams. When Williams went back some months later to retake Black Site 1, Bill made sure to give a heads up to his former mentor, Jonestown, as a way of saying thank you and goodbye. What happened after that was something he considered a success beyond his wildest dreams. While his career path was progressing just as he wanted it to, baby steps after all, his Rourke problem persisted. He and Keyshawn had moved. They hadn't seen the priest again since that champagne brunch, but he still called Bill regularly. Bill always answered, maintaining that facade of friendship. The calls always started with friendly banter, but then turned dark. Frank Rourke insisted that he needed them to be friends. But that friendship, it had to evolve, just like he had. Together, they could work such wonders. Once Bill asked him, "Why do you need me at all, Frank? It's not the friendship. I know that's part of it. I'm not discounting it. But there has to be something else. You're holding back on me." As always, Frank Rourke was honest and forthright in his response. "It's Project Punch Bowl, Bill. I can't find a way into it, and I need it. We need it. We need what they have, and you can access it. You know I have nothing to do with that. I never have." "I know you don't. But you know the names, the faces of the people that do have access. You can get to the avenues of finding a way in, and that's what I need. Bill, I will give you the DRO. I will give you the director's desk. But you need to give me this." To Bill, the most devious part of all of this was that during these months, Father Francis Rourke had emerged as a pious and humble public figure on the Grand Bahama Island. In the aftermath of what was called the incident at the fortress, a bloodbath that he was personally responsible for, Rourke stepped into the public eye with tears running down his cheeks, vowing to rebuild the church and all of the charities that it had supported for so long. And the public loved him for it. Rourke was known for his kindness, his generosity. One of his first efforts was a dental program for local indigent children. Bill informed the director's office that Rourke was no longer an ally to the DRO, that he was in possession of Emissary 1, and that he was expressly interested in Project Punchbowl. Much to his surprise, and at this point in his life, Bill was a hard cat to surprise. The director told him that the DRO was abandoning that wing of the Helping Hand program. They understood that Rourke was dangerous to a certain degree, but unless he was provoked, he was too minor a threat to public security to warrant further action. Bill nodded, ever the humble bootlick. But when he walked out of the office, he was quite sure that something held sway over the director. Either Rourke or Emissary 1. If there was even any difference between the two at this point. The calls from Rourke were becoming ever more deranged. Not angry, not upset, not venting at Bill, nothing like that. He spoke warm, friendly, as he always had. But as that heart became darker and more twisted, the things that came from the heart became ever more repulsive. He wasn't intentionally trying to upset Bill. Not at all. He was just talking about his day, sharing his ups and downs of the job like you can only do with your best friend. Rourke recounted, "You remember Cardinal Hume, don't you? He's a dodgy old so-and-so. But he had the faith. There is no doubting that. I was actually quite shocked at his commitment to his cause. When the time came, I was about to cut out his eyes to pass the Volt's retinal scan. Do you know what he did? He curled up those arthritic old fingers of his, and he ripped out his own eyes. And then he crushed them in his fists, just so that I couldn't use them. Such devotion. It's inspiring, really. You know the soul is real, don't you, Bill? The human spirit is very much alive. And I have found that the best practice is to make sure that spirit is broken and shattered before it can cross over. So Cardinal Hume, I raped him right there on his desk as he bled to death through his eye sockets. I didn't enjoy it, you know. But you understand better than anyone, Bill. Sometimes doing the job is very hard. It got more and more difficult to listen to, but Bill endured it. As hard as it was to be friends, he knew it would be much worse to be enemies with Frank Rourke. One night, in the wee hours, Bill received a call from an unknown number. The woman on the other end said, "I have concerns about the director's office. My name is Lila Ambrose. Can we talk privately?" It took them 2 weeks to coordinate a sufficiently private time and place to meet. Bill brought Lefty as his second, but when he saw that Lila was sitting alone at the table, he dismissed his partner. Lila poured them each 2 fingers of scotch. "A toast," she said, "in remembrance to the friend that we both lost." "I don't have friends," he said. "Neither do I." So they clinked glasses and toasted to that. "Are you tracking him?" she asked. "I don't have to. He's tracking me." She said, "I hear Punchbowl is testing a way to remove them. We could take it out. Maybe we could get him back." "There's no coming back for him," Bill said. "Not from this." It was as if they couldn't bring themselves to say his name. "I've pressured the director's office about him," Lila said. "So have I. I believe the director's office is compromised." Bill emptied his glass. "I have similar concerns." She poured another round. "Handel, you have a good reputation. You seem destined for the office." "I don't want the office. I want the desk." "Well, it sure wouldn't hurt to have an ally, would it?" Bill raised his glass. "The enemy of my enemy." They clinked and sealed their deal with a drink. And then just a few short weeks later, Bill got the call. This was in October of 2014. Bill was in Abilene, Vermont, visiting with Terry Smith on an unofficial piece of business. Keyshawn called him. Bill answered, as he always did, with, "Hi, Ladybug." But it was Rourke. He said, "It's me. Keyshawn can't come to the phone right now." Bill's entire body clenched like a fist. His stomach cramped. His calves knotted. "A little birdie told me that you went to meet with Lila Ambrose. We've spoken about her, Bill. She is a bad apple. You do well to not get too close to someone like that. She's on borrowed time." "What did you do, Frank?" he asked. "Don't worry, Bill. I would never do anything to hurt Keyshawn. Or you. You should know that. Please tell me you didn't kill him." "Kill him? Heavens, no. Perish the thought. No. I just came by to drop off a little present, that's all. To remind you that we are still all on the same side. I'm sure that Keyshawn will call you back when he wakes up." Bill ran to his car. He sped to the plane, and then he raced from the airport back to his house. It only took 4 hours, some in total, but it felt like 4 days. On the way, he called in Lefty for backup, but she was an hour behind him, and he didn't have an hour to wait. He held his gun in a trembling hand and slipped in through his front door. There was music in the air, the crackle of a log in the fireplace. He slowly entered the living room, gun first, and saw Keyshawn sitting in front of the hearth, staring into the flames. "You're home early," Keyshawn said. He wouldn't look at his husband. Bill asked, "Is Frank still here?" "No. Francis left. He just wanted to give me something." And he pointed to the left of the fireplace, to a glass jar. One that was still glazed with the ooze of a black, sluggish brain tumor. But it was empty. Bill choked back a sob. His gun trembled as he aimed it at his husband's head. And then slowly, Keyshawn turned around to face him.
Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. Find the show on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the time being. Or contact the show directly and email us at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. The best way to support the show is on Patreon. Get extras, early release episodes, and minisodes. The episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson, featuring music by Candlegravity, Ratka, Coven, Ergo Phizmiz, Tab, Anitek, Engel, and AK'chamel, the giver of illness, with cancer eclipsed the sun. And as always, Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. These two episodes covered a lot of ground. They touched on a lot of other stories the show has already told. If you found yourself lost at any point, get found. Go back and listen to Drive Like Hell, Mercy, Venom Runs Clear, The Ravenous One, Blood, Devil's Night Ride-Along, Massacre at Black Site 1, Cemetery Smith, Trapdoor Spider, The Machinist, DTK, The Death Trap Killer, All Around the Maypole, The Devil You Know, The Thing in the Basement, The Hand Collector, The Night of the Long Knives, and all previous 5 installments of A Life of Death. That should cover it.